Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This is chapter 7, section 3. As you can see, my Corona stash has gone into hiding again, blended in with my beard. What a fun experiment. This video isn't going to be that long compared to last week and compared to other weeks. Straight ahead, straight ahead. So we're going to talk a little bit about, as you can follow along on the page, but the poet Marshall was talking about how Rome, there's bakers in the morning, there's artisans hammering all day. Rome was the original city that never slept. We think of the city that doesn't sleep as New York City. Well, Rome is the original city that never slept. In fact, not at Marshall's time, but Rome was the first city on the planet to reach 1 million people. That's a lot of people. And the thing is, there's so much noise because there's so many different jobs. That goes back to a good water source leads to good soil. Soil leads to crops, population growth, and then all that to get to different jobs. There's so many different jobs in the ancient city of Rome that you have people working all day long. So it's always noisy. We move on to different social classes. We have rich people, we have poor people. There's a very few amount of rich people, and there are a lot of poor people. That is something that is throughout history has happened. You don't hear about places with a lot of rich people. It's always a few amount of people that have power and have wealth, and then there's a lot of people that do not. Even in the United States of America, that is true. If you look at the percentages of who has a lot of money compared to who has not a lot of money, the people who are poor, there are more poor people than there are extremely rich people. That happened in Roman society. However, it was due to slavery that made Rome actually the poor people in Rome be really, really poor because the slaves took the jobs from the poor people because you didn't have to pay a slave. So the poor people didn't have jobs, and boom, they end up having to rely on the government for a lot of stuff. We'll get to that in a moment. But with the Roman social classes, we have people living on villas, which are large estates. So they have a house in the city, but say they want to get away from their city, from the Roman city, and go to their vacation place. Boom, they have their villa, a large estate. Um, there's this guy Aulus Vitellius. He was a Roman emperor for only 6 months. He completely abused his power, and he would have like 3 or 4 heavy meals. Now, what I guess is a heavy meal, and especially for the 400,000 coins a time, is like the greatest Thanksgiving feast, 3 or 4 times a day. So in 6 months, when this guy was the emperor, he must have gained so much weight just having a Thanksgiving meal 3 or 4 times in a day. Romans were known for their excess, just going above and beyond. This guy, Aulus Vitellius, he went above and beyond. People hated him so much because he was in it for himself. He wasn't in it for Rome. But there's another thing that's mentioned about the exotic meals they would eat. They would eat flamingo, ostrich. We think to ourselves, oh, that's gross. People eat ridiculous things across the planet. But the one thing, dormouse. This I thought was very interesting. And I'll tell you how you do this. You get a mouse. I'm not saying that you have to. Please don't do this. But I'll just tell you how the Romans did this. They get a mouse, all right, and you skin the mouse, whatever. You take out the guts and maybe you leave the bones in. Maybe you debone it, up to you. But it makes sense to have the bones in so the mouse keeps its same shape. And then you get honey and you start to boil that honey. Now to boil honey, you can't do it like super quick. You have to like let it take some time so the honey's not spraying out everywhere. And then by the tail, you just hold the mouse in the honey because it's boiling. That means the mouse is going to cook all the way through, and then when you pull it out, it has this nice honey glaze, and that was a treat for people when they're eating. Then we get to the life of the poor. Like I said earlier, the because there was slavery in ancient Rome, the poor people didn't have jobs because all the slaves had the jobs that the poor people would do. So they relied on the government to provide them food and housing and things just to survive. And the government, when they couldn't provide enough bread, enough wheat for them to make bread, they provided entertainment so people would have their minds distracted from the problems they did have, which is where we get to the bread and circuses section. That's where we get to the gladiators and fighting each other to the death. There were professional gladiators. Many of the gladiators were slaves that were captured in battles, and that was all for the entertainment. it was it's pretty straightforward. That they would fight animals, they would fight each other, they would race around on chariots. Um, they would have actually in the Colosseum, as you read in the last section, they were actually able to flood the bottom of the Colosseum to have mock naval battles. These ships, not massive ships, but have several ships floating around inside the Colosseum and people fighting each other on it. We get past gladiator battles. The Roman family is very important in ancient Rome. There's a whole bunch of writings about people talking about how they enjoyed their families. Moving on, the household, and then we talk about slavery in Rome. How slaves were when you conquer a place, you get the land, you get the resources, you get their money, and you get people. So the slaves were from places they conquered. Depending on what job you had as a slave, whether or not it was going to be, they're all rough. I mean, you're a slave. You're a human who is used as property. So if you worked in the mines, your life was short lived. It was dangerous and terrible work. If you worked in a house, there's a possibility that you could eventually earn your freedom. If you're a gladiator, you were a famous slave. You're still a slave, but you're a famous slave, and you could possibly earn the money to get your freedom. However, it was still slavery. No matter what kind of rosy picture the textbook paints, it was still slavery, people being owned as property. So this section, very quick. This week is just a makeup week. I looked at the stats, and a lot of people need to make up some things. So this is just a very straightforward, no frills section. So anyway, enjoy your day or don't. Always your choice.